Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about what sort of colours you should be buying when purchasing paints. In this video I'm using acrylics, however everything that I talk about can be applied to any type of paint. And hopefully by the end of this video you'll learn what to look for when selecting your paints. So to begin with, there are 4 things I think about when looking at a colour: the opacity, temperature, light fastness and pigment formulation. But before we go into them, let's talk about the general colours you should have in your collection. So at a bare minimum you want your primary colours plus a white. However, I like to also add secondary colours and a couple of browns just so you're not having to mix so much. You can also mix a black using ultramarine blue and brown umber, so a black isn't necessary. Also, if there's a colour that you tend to use a lot, then it might be worth getting that colour so you don't have to keep mixing it up. So with that out of the way, let's go into the 4 things that I think you should be looking for when selecting your paint. For me, the first thing I look at is the opacity, and the opacity just means how transparent the colour is. All paint brands should be displaying this opacity information somewhere, and it is quite often on the paint itself. Most brands also use the same opacity scale, however depending on the brand it may differ slightly from the one I'm showing you. But here are the opacity ratings that Golden Acrylics use. For me, most of the time I want a paint that has good coverage and won't show the colour underneath. So for all my main paint colours, I'm looking for them to be opaque. However, the opacity is dependent on the pigments used, and sometimes it can be hard to find the right colour that is also opaque. So with certain colours I had to settle with semi-opaque. Transparent paints also have their place. For example, when glazing I always try and use a transparent colour. A transparent colour can also be really handy when colour mixing. If we take a white for example, when tinting a colour with white, the opaque titanium white is very powerful, but if I use the same amount of transparent white, in this case it's zinc white, I'm able to tint the colour a lot less. This gives you a lot more control when mixing colours. And although I'm using white as an example here, it goes with any other colour. The transparent colours will always have less effect on the opaque colours when mixing. So the next time you're trying to mix a very specific colour, try using a transparent colour. That way you're able to alter the colour gradually rather than having to go back and forth between colours until the colour is right. Hopefully from the example you can see that the titanium white has made a much lighter colour. That's because it's opaque and a lot stronger. I even add the rest of the zinc white in, and yet it still doesn't get anywhere near as light as the titanium white side. That being said, I find myself using the transparent colours a lot less than my opaque ones. So for my transparent colours, I have decided to just have the primary colours plus a white. You may use them more, so just make sure that the colours you choose fit your needs when it comes to the opacity. Now let's move on to colour temperature. And by colour temperature, it just means how warm or cool the colour is. So if we take a look at the colour wheel, your warmest colour would be an orange and your coolest colour would be a blue. However, temperature can also apply to each individual colour. So for example, if we look at my greens, I have a warm green, the chromium oxide, which is more of a yellowy look to it, and then a cool green, the cobalt green, which is more blue. So when selecting my paints, I like to have a cool and warm variant for each colour. If you aren't a massive fan of paint mixing, then this can save you a lot of time and gives you some good shortcuts for when you have to mix a certain colour. When it comes to blues, and blue being a cool colour, it can be a bit confusing as to what is a warm blue and what is a cool blue. But all you are looking for is something that is closer to a purple and something that is closer to a green. Light fastness is quite often overlooked by beginner artists, but if you're wanting to create artwork that lasts for years, you definitely want to be looking at the light fast ratings. With a light fast colour, it means that it has good ability to resist fading or discoloration. And just like the opacity, each pigment will have a different light fast rating. Again, with Golden as an example, their scale goes from 1 to 5, with 1 being the most light fast and 5 being the least. A paint with a light fast rating of 1 can last over 100 years in normal display conditions, whereas a paint with a light fast rating of 5 will last less than 2 years. So when selecting your paints, try and go for the colours with the best light fast rating. For me, this wasn't too hard, as most of Golden's Heavybody acrylics are light fast, so all except 2 of my colours have a light fast rating of 1, with the other 2 having a light fast rating of 2. Other brands may use a slightly different scale to this one, so make sure you look this up. Finally, I like to take a look at the pigment formulation. And by this I mean what pigments are used to create that colour. Again, with golden acrylics, this information is on each paint tube, but with other brands, if it's not on the paint, they should have it available online. For the most part, I like to use singular pigment colours, which are colours that are made using one pigment instead of a mixture of multiple pigments. Singular pigment colours are generally cleaner and stronger, and many artists believe that the majority of your paints should be singular pigment colours, as you are then only relying on one pigment to give you your desired colour. However, I do find this to be the least important factor when looking at paints. So there are the 4 things I really consider when picking my paints. But now I'm going to put together a list of 10 colours that if you're on a really tight budget, these would be the colours to get. I'm thinking my next video might be trying to use these colours and see how far I can take them. But here's my list of 10 colours that you need. So first we have titanium white and zinc white. However, I have heard that zinc white has some problems when it comes to how archival it is. So you may want to swap this out with a different transparent white if possible. Then we have cadmium yellow medium, your first primary colour and definitely an essential one. Yellow ochre, this colour is one of my favourites and is really nice for them earthy colours. Then we have a cadmium red medium for what a lot of people would call a true red, and then a primary magenta for your second primary colour. Most people think that red, blue and yellow are the primary colours, but magenta is a lot better as a primary red. If you look at printers, they all use CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black. For the blues, I went with an ultramarine blue, as this gives you a really easy way of making black like I said in the beginning, and then a cobalt turquoise. Although I reckon a cobalt teal would be better as it's slightly more on the blue side, but this colour wasn't available for me when I bought them. And this cobalt teal would act as your primary blue. Finally, we have chromium oxide green. So that's the 10 colours, and I believe that these colours will be all you ever need. But make sure to keep an eye out for my next video where I will put them to the test. I may well end up making some changes after that video. As you would have seen throughout this video, in the background I was painting a small landscape in acrylics. Like all of my other videos, all of the supplies I use will be listed in the description. But for now, I'll let the rest of the painting play out. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.